The gavel fell once, and darkness descended over the room. Everyone realized this wasn't yet another trial. This was the day that secrets would be finally brought into the open. The gavel crashed like thunder, resonating off the high wooden walls of the courtroom. For an instant, time itself seemed to stand still. All eyes in the room looked forward, where the judge's severe glare swept over the crowd. The air was heavy, almost turgid, thick with anticipation. This was no run-of-the-mill case. No, this was the trial everyone was talking about. The trial that had brought strangers, neighbors, reporters, and even old friends into the same smothering room. Everyone needed answers. Everyone needed the truth. The benches were full. People packed in shoulder to shoulder. Reporters held tight to notepads and pressed recorders against their chests, anticipating each word. Their pens clicked impatiently against paper, as if attempting to let out their own excitement. The buzz of whispers rippled like a wave from the rear of the courtroom to the front. Some leaned forward, their eyes wide with anticipation, while others sat rigidly back, tense, fearing what they would hear. Behind the wooden doors, which were thick as a house, the click of cameras continued to echo. Flickers of light from outside breached the tiny glass windows with each entry and departure. The world itself, apparently, was waiting for this trial to take its course. At the center sat the defendant. His hands were clenched firmly on the table, knuckles pale from the pressure. His expression was serene on the surface, but his agitated eyes betrayed him. They flashed around the room, onto the reporters, onto the jury, onto the judge. He was trapped, caged, and he knew it. Some claimed he was guilty. Others felt that he was a victim of deception. But one thing was sure, everyone was here because of him. This case wasn't about pilfered funds. It wasn't about property or straightforward crimes. No, this case involved betrayal, secrets kept deep, and falsehoods that had insidiously consumed the core of a family. The truth was kept hidden for so long. And now, in the harsh glow of the courtroom, it was going to be revealed. The judge pushed her glasses up and leaned forward. Her voice was sharp, steady, and unshakable. A voice that could quiet a storm. "Order in the court," she declared. Whispers ceased. Reporters paused, hovering pens over paper. The crowd stood upright, pulses racing. Even the accused looked up, locking gazes with the judge as if challenging her to proceed. She allowed the silence to drag on, allowing the tension to weigh more heavily, like a rope tightening around the space. And then she spoke. "We will begin." And with those 4 words, the storm started. The mood changed in an instant. The attorneys rustled papers. The jurors gave each other anxious glances. The bailiff moved forward, reading charges in a voice that rang out in every part of the room. Every syllable he uttered was like a bolt of lightning, lighting up the dark corners of the tale everyone thought they understood. As the accusations rang out, heads in the crowd turned to one another, murmurs swelling again, like an incoming tide. A woman in the front row gripped her hands hard together, lips moving in silent prayer. A man in the back shook his head, incredulity painted across his face. The defendant didn't blink. He sat frozen, teeth gritted, eyes squinting, as if every word was meaningless to him. But inwardly, the twitch in his eye betrayed another tale. He could sense the walls closing around him. The prosecutor stood up, his steps deliberate on the wooden floor. He had an aura that instantly quieted the room. He gave the jury a swift glance before starting. "Ladies and gentlemen, you will be hearing truths today that have long been concealed. Lies will be destroyed. Masks will be stripped. And at the conclusion of this trial, you will be able to view the accused in his true form." A collective shiver ran through the crowd. The gravity of his words hung in the air, weighing down on the accused like a rock. But the defense attorney smirked, calm, confident, almost amused. He adjusted his tie and whispered something to his client, who gave the smallest nod. It was a nod that said, "We're ready. Let them try." The judge addressed the jury. 12 faces glared back, each bearing their own tale. Some were unsure, some resolute, some even petrified. They were aware of the power they possessed, aware that their verdict would alter lives, and yet none of them really understood the extent of the darkness they were going to unfold. The courtroom was not just a building that day. It was a battlefield. every utterance a weapon, every bit of evidence a bullet, and every witness a ticking time bomb poised to erupt with surprises no one expected. The defendant fidgeted in his seat, his foot tapping against the ground, his gaze cut towards the front row where he saw familiar faces, former friends, those who trusted him, who believed in him. Now they were present as witnesses, prepared to testify against him. Their eyes never met his, but tension between them spoke volumes. The accused faintly smiled, a smile that made the room turn cold. Was it arrogance? Was it confidence? Or was it the smile of a man who possessed a secret none of them shared? Again, the judge's gavel came down. Proceed. And with that, the first file was set on the table. The first witness was being readied. The crowd leaned in, hungry and restless, eager to know what was next. For years there had been whispers in this case. Rumors of betrayal, late-night altercations, secrets whispered behind closed doors. No one knew what was real and what was imagined. But now, sworn in, the truth would no longer be concealed. Each nook of the courtroom hummed with tension. The air was electric, as if lightning were seconds away from striking. It wasn't a trial, this was a reckoning. The defendant sat up straighter, the smile vanishing from his face into a hard, cold glare. The prosecutor fiddled with his notes, eyes blazing with determination. The defense were ready to turn the tables with every trick in their book, and the audience. They waited, holding their breath on the very edge of their seats. For they all knew, this was only the start. The bailiff's voice sliced through the heavy silence of the courtroom. Call your first witness. The prosecutor stood, his suit crisp, his eyes unblinking as he spoke to the judge. Your Honor, the state calls our first witness. The heavy wooden doors at the rear of the courtroom swung open. All heads turned. The echo of heels on the shining floor rang out with studied slowness. A woman entered. She was fidgety, anyone could tell that, but there was also a certain determination in the way she kept her head up. Gasps whizzed their way around the audience. Some of them immediately recognized her. She was not just another face. She was someone attached to the core of this case, someone who had been intimate with the accused. Reporters leaned forward, writing furiously. The photographers outside the room, denied access, would have sold their souls to get a shot of her face in this instant. Her white face, her shaking hands, and her eyes, which flared once at the accused and then averted themselves. The defendant fidgeted. For the first time during the trial, a flash of nervousness crossed his face. His jaw clenched, his fingers tapped lightly on the table, but the beat was irregular, giving away his jitters. She moved to the front, escorted by the bailiff, and sat down at the witness stand. Put your right hand up, the bailiff said. She trembled, but she raised her hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? There was a pause. Her mouth opened, but nothing emerged. She looked again at the accused. His cold, piercing gaze was fixed on her like daggers. It was a look that embodied history, secrets, and a silent threat. At last she barely whispered, I do. The room breathed out. The prosecutor approached, his tone unshaking. Please say your name for the record. She whispered her name, but it was enough. Whispers spread through the courtroom. Her name was already well known, the topic of endless gossip and conjecture. Now saying it in the formal quiet of the courtroom, it had a different significance. Tell us, the prosecutor went on, what occurred on the night in question. Her gaze skittered about the room. The jury leaned forward, pens poised. The audience sat frozen, lest they blink. Every detail was now significant. She swallowed hard, her throat parched. Then slowly she spoke. It was late, later than I ever was. I couldn't sleep. I remember hearing voices outside, angry voices. I thought, at first, that I was dreaming, but then I realized, it was real. She paused, her voice cracking, but continued. I walked closer. I didn't want to, but I felt like I needed to know. That's when I saw him. She pointed a shaking finger in the direction of the accused. I saw him there. Gasps swept over the courtroom in a wave. A pen fell from a reporter's hand. A woman in the crowd covered her mouth with her hands. The accused shifted back in his chair, his jaw clenching tighter, but he didn't look away from her. The prosecutor nodded again. And what did you hear? Her knuckles were white as her hands gripped the edge of the stand. I was told things I'll never forget, things that still haunt me tonight. He said it was over, that nothing would get in his way now. And the expression on his face. I'll never forget his eyes. Cold, firm, like he'd made up his mind already. Her words trembled, and her eyes brimmed with tears. But she continued speaking. I wanted to run, but I couldn't move. I just stood there, bracing myself. I knew if he caught sight of me, I'd be next. The crowd burst out in whispers. The judge rapped her gavel. Order in the court. But order was out of the question. The tension crackled, pulsed, suffocated every crevice of the room. The defense attorney finally stood up, his face serene, but his eyes cutting like a knife. Objection, Your Honor. Sheer speculation. She acknowledges that she was frightened. Fear can impair judgment. How do we know that what she describes seeing is even possible? The judge's eyes tightened. The weight of her testimony will be determined by the jury. Objection overruled. Proceed. The defense leaned back, a small mocking smile on his face, but his eyes darted nervously toward the jury. The prosecutor addressed the witness again. Did anyone else observe what you observed? She hesitated. Her lips shook. Her eyes flashed to the gallery, where she saw known faces. Faces that turned away, refusing to confront her. At last, she breathed. No, I was alone. The defense attorney took advantage of the moment. He arose again, his tone slicing like steel. So what you're saying is you, and you alone, claimed to have witnessed something no one else did. Convenient, isn't it? He advanced on her, his words coming in rapid, staccato bursts. You were afraid. You were in the dark. You acknowledge you were paralyzed with fear. Maybe you saw something you didn't really see. Maybe your imagination supplemented the blanks. The witness's voice shook, but her eyes blazed with determination. No, I saw what I saw. I will never forget it. Not in 1,000 years. The defense sneered, facing the jury again as if her own conviction was mere theatrics. But there were some jurors who squirmed in their seats. They felt the gravity of her words. Over at the defendant's table, the accused leaned forward ever so slightly, his lips curling into the hint of a smile. It was not warm. It was not friendly. It was the smile of a man who was either phenomenally confident or concealing something deeper. The witness looked at him again. This time, rather than fear, there was something else, a challenge. The room breathed in anticipation. For now everyone realized this trial wasn't about evidence. It was about fortitude. It was about who would crack first. The accused, the witnesses, or the thin line of truth poised delicately between them. And this was only the start. The witness's words lingered in the air like smoke after flames. The tension was suffocating. The jury whispering to each other. The crowd shuddering under the burden of what they had heard. But just as the defense was about to have her testimony dismissed as imagination and fear, the prosecutor's back straightened, his hand on a thick manila envelope. His eyes swept the jury, then the judge. Your Honor, he said, his voice slow, measured. The state has received new evidence. Evidence that will dispel all doubt in this court. The crowd gasped. The defendant bristled in his seat. His lawyer jumped to his feet at once. Objection. The prosecution is trying to ambush us. This evidence was not made available. The prosecutor overruled him, his tone sharp. It's new, Your Honor. And it specifically corroborates the testimony that's been given. The judge scowled, leaning back in her chair. Come to the bench. Both lawyers proceeded, their voices low. The accused did not take his eyes from the envelope. His jaw clenched, his fists closing so hard his knuckles turned white. Cracks were appearing in the smile he had maintained since the trial started. The judge heard intently, her face impassive. At last she nodded once. Curtly. Overruled. The evidence will be admitted. The defense lawyer stopped short, then spoke to his client. The defendant shook his head slightly, his complexion pale. The prosecutor stepped back into the center of the room. He held up the envelope for everyone to see. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he began, his voice escalating with each word. This envelope holds the truth that the accused has attempted to hide. It holds the very evidence that confirms our witness's testimony. The envelope was torn open. The tearing of paper was like thunder. Inside, the prosecutor took out a few things. A set of photographs, a pile of printed text messages, and one handwritten letter. He raised the photographs first. These were taken the very night of the incident. The first photograph was placed on the projector for the jury to view. Gasps rose from the crowd. The picture was grainy but clear enough. The accused, standing in the shadows of the very location the witness had told them about. His face cold, his stance unmistakable. The prosecutor's voice was cutting. Taken at 11:48. The defendant said he was nowhere around the area. Ladies and gentlemen, there he is. Right where our witness put him. The defense attorney leapt to her feet. Objection. These are circumstantial photographs, and their validity cannot. The judge's gavel came down. Overruled. The jury will make that call. The prosecutor dropped the second photo onto the screen. This time the accused had company. He was clasping something, letters, maybe, or papers. The witness gasped in the stand, her hand shooting up to her mouth. "I saw that," she whispered, her voice breaking. "That's just what he was carrying with him." The prosecutor faced her. "And what did he do with it?" Her voice trembled. "He burned it. I saw the fire." The prosecutor gestured. "But it did not all burn. Because, ladies and gentlemen, this," he held up the letter, "was recovered." The courtroom erupted. People leaned forward, tilting their heads, hoping to catch a glimpse. Reporters wrote so wildly their pens almost tore the paper. The accused finally jumped, slapping his hand against the table. His attorney clutched at his arm, urgently whispering. But the damage had been done. The jury had witnessed his outburst. The note was shown next. The writing was uneven, hasty, but identifiable. The prosecutor read from it. "It's done. No one will ever know the truth. If anyone talks, they'll regret it. This family is mine, and I won't let anyone take it away from me." Each sentence was like a knife. The jury shifted restlessly. A woman on the panel hid behind her hand, appalled. The accused's head fell for the first time, eyes on the table. The defense attorney rose again, his voice pleading. "Your Honor, this letter is evidence of nothing. Anyone might have written it." The handwriting, the prosecutor cut him off with a voice like a sword. "Handwriting has already been compared and verified by experts. It belongs to the defendant. Beyond any reasonable doubt." The defense went stiff, his face pale, but the prosecutor wasn't through. He picked up the last item of evidence. The text messages. These were recovered from the defendant's phone. They'd been deleted but not lost from the cloud. They indicate contact between the defendant and an unknown number the same night of the incident. He put the first message on the screen. "Defendant, it's happening tonight. Be ready." Gasps once more. The second message, "Defendant, no witnesses. This ends now." The room burst with whispers, voices overlapping in shock. The judge hammered her gavel. "Order," but the whispers did not cease. The force of those words had already taken root deep within the minds of all the people in that room. The prosecutor's voice was firm, calm, but with fire burning beneath it. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, our witness explained to you what she heard and saw that night. And now the photographs, the letter, and the messages verify it. The accused was not innocent. He was not a victim of false evidence. He was present. He plotted it, and he attempted to hide the truth." He paused, allowing the silence to linger, allowing each juror to feel the gravity of his words. "Tonight, the fiction is over. Tonight, the truth stands in this court." The suspect finally lost his temper. He stood, pounding his fists on the table. His voice thundered throughout the court. "This is a lie. All of it. You believe you know the truth, but you don't know anything." The bailiff moved quickly, pushing him back into his seat. His attorney shouted for calm. But it was too late. The jury had seen the raw anger. The mask ripped away. The judge's gavel cracked like lightning. "Order in the court." One more outburst, and you'll be removed. The accused sat back down, his chest heaving, his face red. But the damage was done. The jury no longer perceived a tranquil man wrongly accused. They witnessed an individual disintegrating in the confines of truth. The prosecutor replaced the envelope on the table, his gaze fixed on the jury. "This is not guesswork. This is not fantasy. This is proof. Irrefutable, incontrovertible proof. And it speaks louder than any words." The room was silent, absolutely silent. The eyes of the jury were wide open. The witness looked down at her shaking hands. The accused hung his head low, sweat forming on his forehead. And in that silence, everyone knew the same thing. The case had changed. The witness's account was no longer a tenuous tale of fear and recollection. It was now a knife, honed by proof, directed squarely at the defendant, and it had pierced deep. The weight of the evidence continued to bear down on the room like a cast iron chain. The photos, the messages, the letter, each had sliced through the accused's defense like a blade. The jury's eyes stayed on him, doubt gone, suspicion hardening into something more pointed. Everyone assumed it was finished. The case seemed closed. The prosecutor sat back, pleased as the crowd murmured that justice was already accessible. But then, the defense lawyer stood up. Slowly, serenely, too serenely. He smoothed his suit, adjusted his tie, and provided the slightest smile, the sort that sent a shiver down everyone's spine. "Your Honor," he said, his voice as silky as a summer breeze. "The defense would like to call one final witness." The words hit the room like a sledgehammer. "A new witness? Now?" The audience gasped. The jury shifted uncomfortably in their seats, and even the judge raised an eyebrow. The prosecutor instantly objected. "Your Honor, the state was not apprised of any other witnesses. This is a tactic of delay, nothing more." The defense attorney held up a hand, his grin never wavering. "Not so, Your Honor. This witness is only recently discovered. Their evidence will show that the prosecution's evidence is not only deceptive, but doctored." The judge sat forward, her tone firm. "Who is this witness?" The defense attorney faced the courtroom doors. The tension was thick. Every eye looked in his direction. The thick doors groaned open, and a man walked through. The audience gasped as one. It wasn't anybody. It was somebody connected to the accused. Someone everyone believed would never talk against him. The accused's face went pale. His mouth opened, but nothing emerged. He gazed at the man approaching the stand, his eyes open in shock. The witness came in with steady strides, his shoulders back, his expression inscrutable. But there was something in his eyes, something heavy, something shattered. The bailiff escorted him to the stand. "Raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" The man spoke in a low, firm voice. "I do." The defense attorney did not hesitate. He addressed the jury, then returned to the witness. "Please state your name for the record." The man uttered his name, and it spread through the courtroom like a ripple of shock. The crowd burst into murmurs. Pencils scratched madly. The jury sat forward, mouths agape or eyes wide. The prosecutor's jaw clamped shut. He did not see this coming. No one did. The defense lawyer walked back and forth, deliberately. "You know the accused, don't you?" The witness paused. His gaze flashed to the accused, who sat like a statue, glaring at him with eyes that seemed capable of melting steel. "Yes," the witness finally replied. "I know him." "How long have you known him?" "Long enough to know what he can do." The audience gasped once again. The judge's gavel came down. Order in the court. But there was no order. The air was too tense, the suspense too acute. The defense lawyer moved forward. "Say in the court what you have come to tell." The witness took a deep, shuddery breath. His voice shook at first, but as he spoke the words grew firmer. "The prosecution is asking you to take in what the pictures, the messages, the letter. But what you don't know is the fact that it was all set up. Someone wanted him to appear guilty. Someone needed to ruin him." The jury stirred, muttering among themselves. The prosecutor leapt to his feet. "Objection. Free-floating speculation. No basis." But the defense was prepared. "This witness isn't speculating. He has evidence." The courtroom exploded again. The judge's gavel came down, but the room hummed with shock, incredulity, and fear. The defense attorney placed a folder in front of the witness. The man opened it with shaking hands and drew out some sheets of paper. "These," he explained, holding them up for the eyes of the jury, "are telephone records. They establish that the accused did not send these text messages. They were sent using a number that had been cloned to appear to be his." Gasps, murmurs. A woman in the audience breathed. "That's not possible." But her voice was lost in the mounting storm. The prosecutor leapt up once more.
Your Honor, this is a scam. These records might have been manufactured. The defense lawyer sneered. These records have been authenticated by an independent forensic examiner. The state had every chance to verify them. They didn't. Why? Because they wanted a conviction, not the truth. The eyes of the jury flashed toward the prosecutor. His face flushed, his demeanor cracking for the first time. But the witness wasn't done. He produced another page of paper. His hands trembled, his voice catching. And this is a copy of the original letter. Not the one the prosecution had, but the original, the one that was never intended to be destroyed. The defense attorney leaned forward. Tell the court what's in that letter. The man's eyes brimmed with tears. He cleared his throat, his voice cracking. It doesn't say what they say. It doesn't threaten anybody. It doesn't admit to anything. It says he was afraid, that he was defending his family, that someone was pursuing him. The room erupted. Some yelled, some gasped, others shook their heads in shock. The judge brought her gavel down so forcefully the sound resonated like a gunshot. Order! I will have order in this courtroom. But the order never quite came back. The trial had moved again, suddenly explosively. The prosecutor's face contorted with rage. He rose, his finger pointed at the witness. You're lying. You're protecting him. The witness's gaze met his. His voice rose in anger. No. I remained silent long enough. I can't keep doing it. I know what really happened. And so do you. The prosecutor stood still, his eyes bulging. A silence descended over the courtroom. What did it signify? Did the prosecutor know something he had not said? The jury hushed among themselves, their faces ashen. The crowd watched, bewildered, torn between shock and confusion. And the defendant, for the first time, he smiled. Slow, sinister smile that sent chills down the courtroom. The judge finally brought her gavel down. Recess this court until tomorrow morning. But the harm was done. As the jury filed out, their faces betrayed it. Some appeared convinced of the accused's guilt. Others appeared shaken, their conviction shattered by the surprise. The audience spilled out into the hallway, where reporters yelled, cameras snapped, and voices fought each other in chaos. Within, the suspect leaned over to his lawyer, speaking quietly and causing the man to nod. On the other side of the room, the witness covered his eyes, sobbing uncontrollably. The prosecutor remained still, watching the proof in the witness's hand, his confidence destroyed. And the judge sat back in her seat, rubbing her temples, knowing testimony tomorrow would destroy the case entirely. The trial was not as straightforward anymore. Lines between truth and falsehood had become blurred, and everybody present in that courtroom knew this one thing. The real story had only just emerged. The following morning, the courtroom was charged. The air crackled with tension. The gallery seats were packed with reporters. Cameras outside the courthouse flashed like lightning. Everyone was waiting, not just for a verdict, but for the truth. The defendant entered with an odd air of confidence, his suit neatly pressed, his smile pale but present. It was the type of smile that made others uneasy, a smile that indicated he had some secret that the others did not. On the other side of the aisle, the prosecutor was haggard. His tie was undone, his eyes red. He hadn't slept. The defense's unexpected witness had blown his case apart, and now he was struggling not to win, but to save his reputation. The jury entered, their faces impassive. Some were stone-faced. Others refused eye contact. Each step they made rang out like a drumbeat, counting down to destiny. And then the judge arrived. The room stood, then sat in stunned quiet as her gavel snapped like thunder. The closing arguments.
The prosecutor went first. His tone was strong, but fissures of desperation cut through it. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he started moving slowly. This is a case about truth. It's a case about evidence. And it's a case about justice for the life that was taken. He paused, his eyes flicking to the accused, whose smirk grew wider. Yes, the defense has called a surprise witness. Yes, they filed new papers. Don't forget what you've heard already. The pictures, the texts, the accused actions. Don't get fooled by smoke and mirrors. He's trying to make you question yourselves. Don't give him that authority. Observe the facts, and you'll find only one conclusion: guilty. He gestured toward the accused, his voice rising. Don't let him go free. Don't let him get away with it. The prosecutor sat, his chest bulging, his hands shaking ever so slightly. The defense lawyer stood up slowly, unmoved. His voice was cool, measured, deadly. Ladies and gentlemen, the state would like you to think this man is guilty, because it's convenient, because it works well with their narrative. But what you've witnessed is not truth. It's a deliberate fabrication. Evidence was tampered with. Letters were forged. Messages were fabricated. And yesterday you heard the testimony that revealed all of it. He moved closer to the jury, speaking softly. Ask yourselves, if the state had such a good case, why did they have to conceal the actual letter? Why did they have to disregard the phone records? Because they knew, deep down, they knew they couldn't establish guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the one standard that counts here. The defense attorney came to a halt before the jury box, his tone now biting. Don't punish a man because you're afraid of him. Don't convict him because it's easier than facing the truth. The truth is messy. It's complicated. But in this courtroom, truth still matters. He turned, nodded once to the accused, then sat. The judge's gavel struck. The jury will now deliberate. The waiting game. The jury was let out, and the room exhaled simultaneously. The accused relaxed, arms crossed, that distant smirk still drawn on his face. He whispered something to his attorney, who merely nodded. The prosecutor wouldn't meet anyone's eye. His hands clenched on the table so tightly the knuckles whitened. Hours ticked by. Reporters flooded out news. Crowds outside swelled to hundreds, chanting, waiting, demanding answers. Within, the tension became intolerable. Each tick of the clock resounded more loudly, as if for a countdown to a detonation. Then at last, the bailiff's voice thundered. All rise. The jury has reached a verdict. The verdict. The jury returned, each countenance darker than before. The foreperson held the verdict slip, his hand quite shaky. The judge's voice commanded silence. Has the jury reached a unanimous verdict? Yes, Your Honor, the foreperson said. Please deliver the verdict to the bailiff. The paper had been handed over. The judge read it hastily, then returned it. Her expression revealed nothing. Her voice shook as the foreperson stood. In the case of the state against the defendant, on the charge of, reporters went stock still, pens poised, families held each other's hands. We, the jury, find the defendant. A pause. The world waited with bated breath. Not guilty. The explosion, chaos. Utter chaos. The courtroom exploded in cries, screams, gasps. Half the crowd shrieked in horror, the other half in indignation. A woman passed out. Reporters almost pushed each other down in their haste to get to the doors to break the news. The prosecutor's face disintegrated. He slumped over into his chair, gazing blankly ahead, his career flashing before his eyes. The defendant? He smiled, broad this time. A cold, victorious smile. He slowly stood up. The defense lawyer shook his hand, while cameras snapped wildly. The judge pounded her gavel repeatedly. Order, order in the court. If there is not order, I will clear this courtroom. But there was no order, not anymore. The aftermath as the throng overflowed into the hallways. Anger and incredulity boiled outside. Demonstrators yelled, reporters yelled questions, and police fought to maintain the line. Inside, the prosecutor moved to the defense attorney, his face white. His tone was hushed, but it was dripping with venom. You know he did it, you know? The defense attorney stood close, responding in a whisper with a smile. Knowing isn't proving. The prosecutor's jaw clenched. He glared at the defendant, who was shaking hands with his defenders, smiling like a king reclaiming his throne. But then, the unexpected. Yesterday's surprise witness, the man who had turned the case, abruptly rose. His complexion was white, his hands trembling. He cried out, his voice breaking. "Hey, wait!" The room came to a halt. Cameras swiveled around, microphones thrust forward. The witness shook his finger at the accused, his face red with anger. You think you've deceived them, but you didn't deceive me. I know what you've done, and I promise, the truth will out. The accused turned slowly, his grin dissolving into a cold blank stare. The room was like ice for an instant. Then he leaned forward a little and mouthed just one word to the witness. Careful. The witness reeled back, as if struck. The judge called for security. But the damage was done. The trial was finished. The verdict announced. But the story? The story was hardly begun. Because deep down everyone knew. This wasn't the end. It was just the start.